In the bustling city of Zawadi, where tall buildings touched the sky and the streets were always alive with people, a young girl named Nyah scrubbed the cold marble floor of a grand house. Her small hands were rough and cracked from endless labour, her back aching from hours of work. The soapy water stung the cuts on her fingers, but she dared not stop. Standing nearby, her stepmother, Mama Jalia, watched with cold, unfeeling eyes. She tapped her foot impatiently, her expensive silk dress flowing around her. "You're nothing but a burden," she snapped. "Clean faster, or you won't eat tonight." Nyah lowered her head, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Yes, Mama Jalia," she whispered, scrubbing harder. She was only 5 when her mother passed away, leaving behind a grieving husband and a daughter too young to understand loss. Her father, a wealthy businessman, remarried Mama Jalia, hoping she would bring love and warmth into their home. But soon after, he mysteriously disappeared, leaving Nyah trapped in a house that no longer felt like home. Mama Jalia held a dark secret, one she never spoke of but carried like a shadow. She knew something about Nyah's father's disappearance, and she was determined to keep that truth buried. To her, Nyah was not a daughter. She was a nuisance, an unwanted presence. While her stepsister, Amani, wore silk dresses and attended the finest school, Nyah was forced to wear rags and scrub floors. While Amani feasted on warm meals, Nyah ate cold leftovers, sitting alone in the dimly lit kitchen. She wasn't treated as part of the family. She was treated worse than a servant. Still, Nyah never complained. She had learned that crying changed nothing. Despite everything, something deep inside Nyah told her she didn't belong here. Not in this life of suffering. It wasn't just the cruel treatment. It was something else, a feeling. A whisper in her heart that she was meant for more. One night, as she cleaned the old storage room, she stumbled upon a wooden box covered in dust. Curiosity sparked inside her. Carefully, she lifted the lid and gasped. Inside, she found an old photograph. It showed her father standing beside a tall, powerful-looking man in a dark suit. His face seemed familiar. She leaned closer, and her eyes widened in shock. It was Chief Zuberi, the president of the country. "Why would my father be with the president?" she whispered, her fingers trembling as she held the picture. But before she could think further, a cold voice sliced through the silence. "What do you think you're doing?" Nyah jumped, turning to see Mama Jalia standing in the doorway, her face twisted with anger. Before Nyah could react, Mama Jalia snatched the photograph from her hands. "This does not concern you," she hissed, and before Nyah could stop her, she tossed the picture into the fireplace. "No!" Nyah cried, rushing forward, but the flames had already swallowed the image, turning it to ash. Mama Jalia grabbed her by the arm, her grip tight and painful. "If I ever catch you snooping again, you will regret it," she snarled, before shoving her aside and walking away. Nyah sat there, staring at the dying embers of the only clue she had about her father. Her heart pounded in her chest. Mama Jalia was hiding something, and no matter what, Nyah would find out the truth. The sun hung low in the sky when an expensive black car pulled up in front of the house. Out stepped a man in a dark suit, Senator Comba. His sharp eyes scanned the place before landing on Nyah. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "She is young but strong," he said, circling her like a vulture. "She will make a fine servant for my house." Nyah's stomach twisted. Something about this man made her skin crawl. Mama Jalia barely hesitated. "Take her. She's useless to me," she said coldly. Amani, dressed in a silk gown, clapped her hands with delight. "Finally, the dirty rat is leaving," she sneered. Nyah's world shattered. She was not a child to them, not family. She was nothing more than a thing to be sold. "No, no, please," she begged, looking at her stepmother with desperate eyes. But Mama Jalia turned away as if she didn't hear. Nyah's heart pounded. If she didn't escape now, she never would. That night, as the house fell silent, Nyah made her decision. She had no choice. She had to run. With shaky hands, she unlatched the back door and stepped outside. The cold night air bit at her skin, but she didn't care. She crept past the sleeping guards, her bare feet making no sound on the ground. Just as she reached the gate, a harsh hand grabbed her arm. "You will never escape me." Mama Jalia's voice was filled with fury. Nyah struggled, panic surging through her. If she was caught, she would be sent away forever. She had to fight. With all the strength in her small body, she twisted, kicked, and pulled. The moment Mama Jalia's grip loosened, Nyah broke free. She ran like her life depended on it. Behind her, Mama Jalia screamed, but Nyah didn't stop. She ran through the dark streets of Zawadi, her feet bleeding from sharp stones, her lungs burning, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. By the time the first rays of sunlight touched the city, Nyah's legs could carry her no further. She collapsed in a quiet alley, exhausted, hungry, and afraid. She barely noticed when a warm, gentle hand touched her shoulder. "Child, are you all right?" a soft voice asked. Nyah looked up to see an older woman with kind, worried eyes. She was dressed in a simple but clean dress, a basket of fruits resting beside her. "Come, eat something," the woman said, handing her a piece of bread. Nyah hesitated, but hunger won. She took a bite, the taste bringing tears to her eyes. "Where are your parents?" the woman asked. Nyah looked down, gripping the bread tightly. I don't know," she whispered. The woman, Auntie Casey, studied her with a thoughtful expression. She could see the pain in Nyah's eyes. Something was not right. For now, she would not ask more. For now, she would just help. Auntie Casey led Nyah through the narrow, winding streets of Zawadi, her grip firm yet gentle. They arrived at a modest but well-guarded home on the outskirts of the city. Inside, an elderly man sat in a wooden chair, his sharp eyes scanning them as they entered. His presence alone demanded respect. "General Mosi, this child needs your help," Auntie Casey said. The moment the old soldier heard Nyah's name, his face changed, his eyes widened, and his hands trembled slightly as he set down his teacup. "Nyah," he whispered, as if saying her name out loud confirmed something impossible. He studied her face, his gaze filled with memories of a past he thought was buried. Nyah sat stiffly, confusion swirling inside her. "Do you know me?" she asked hesitantly. The general exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. "Child, you are more than you think." He paused, his voice thick with emotions. "Your father was not just a businessman. He was the president's most trusted advisor." Nyah's heart pounded. "What? And your real mother," he continued, his voice lowering, "was the president's sister." The room spun. Her breath hitched. That means," General Mosi nodded, "you are the president's niece." Nyah's head shook in disbelief. It was impossible. If that were true, why had she spent her whole life being treated like a slave? Why had she suffered while others lived in luxury? "But why was I hidden away?" Her voice was barely a whisper. The general's face darkened. "There was a conspiracy, child. A terrible one. Your father discovered something dangerous, something that powerful people didn't want him to know. So, they silenced him." His voice was heavy with sorrow. "Your stepmother was part of it." Nyah's entire body tensed. Her father had been murdered, and the woman who had tormented her for years had been involved. A lump formed in her throat, anger and grief crashing over her like a storm. She clenched her fists. "I have to tell the president. He deserves to know the truth." The general gave a grim nod. "Yes, but it won't be easy." Auntie Casey placed a comforting hand on Nyah's shoulder. "We will help you, child, but you must be careful. Mama Jalia won't let you escape again." As if on cue, a distant sound shattered the moment. Shouting, heavy footsteps. "They've found us!" General Mosi growled, moving swiftly to lock the door. Mama Jalia had sent men after her. If they caught her, she wouldn't live to see another sunrise. "We need to move. Now!" Auntie Casey urged. Nyah took a deep breath, pushing away the fear clawing at her chest. She was done running. It was time to fight. Disguised in a hooded cloak, she followed General Mosi and Auntie Casey into the night, her heart pounding. The road ahead was dangerous, but she had no choice. She would reach the president. She would expose the truth, no matter what it took. Nyah's breath was ragged as she moved through the crowded streets, her cloak pulled tightly around her. The presidential palace was within sight, towering in the distance like a beacon of hope. Just a few more steps, and she could finally tell the truth. But before she could take another step, strong hands grabbed her from behind. A sack was thrown over her head. She kicked, she screamed, but it was useless. They had found her. When the sack was yanked off, she was staring into the cold, cruel eyes of Mama Jalia. "You really thought you could escape me?" her stepmother hissed. Nyah struggled, but the men holding her were too strong. She could barely breathe. "You think you are special?" Mama Jalia sneered, stepping closer. "You think you deserve a better life?" Her voice dripped with venom. "You are nothing, just like your father. And just like him, you will disappear." Nyah's heart pounded. It was true. Mama Jalia had been behind it all. She had sold her father's life for power, just as she had tried to sell Nyah. "I will never let you win," Nyah spat, fire burning in her eyes. Mama Jalia only laughed. "Oh, child, you already lost." The guards dragged her into a dark, damp room and tied her hands behind her back. The door slammed shut, locking her inside. The air smelled of dust and rot. For a moment, despair crept in. Was this how it would end? After everything, was she going to die in this cold, empty room? Number, she had come too far. "I am not weak," she whispered, forcing herself to breathe. "I am my father's daughter." She looked around, searching. In the dim light, she spotted something. An old knife, rusted but sharp enough. With careful movements, she shuffled toward it. It took all her strength, but she grabbed the knife and began cutting through the ropes. Every second felt like an eternity. She heard footsteps outside. Time was running out. Finally, the last fiber snapped. She was free. She wasted no time. Kicking open the weak wooden door, she bolted out, heart hammering in her chest. Mama Jalia's men were caught off guard. By the time they reacted, Nyah was already gone, sprinting toward the only place that could save her, the palace. Guards stood at the massive golden gates, their spears crossed. They frowned at her ragged appearance. "You don't belong here," one said. Nyah's entire body trembled, but she refused to back down. "I am the president's niece," she screamed, her voice echoing through the courtyard. "I can prove it." For a moment there was silence. Then, a deep, commanding voice rang out. "Let her through." The guards hesitated but stepped aside. Chief Zuberi, the president himself, stood before her. His presence was powerful, his eyes sharp, but when he looked at her, something shifted in his expression. His breath caught, his face softened. "You," he whispered, "you have your mother's eyes." Nyah felt her throat tighten. Tears burned in her eyes, but she held them back. "I know the truth," she said, her voice steady. "About my father, about Mama Jalia, about everything." For the first time in her life, someone was listening. And this time, she would not be silenced. The grand halls of the presidential palace were filled with tense whispers. The air was thick with anticipation as Chief Zuberi stood before a panel of investigators, his expression dark with anger. Nyah sat beside him, her hands clenched into fists. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. The investigation moved quickly. Documents were uncovered, secrets exposed. It was undeniable. Mama Jalia had conspired with corrupt politicians to silence Nyah's father. He had known too much, and they had made sure he never spoke again. When the verdict was announced, the room erupted. Mama Jalia was found guilty of conspiracy and murder. The once powerful woman was dragged into the courtroom, her face pale with rage and fear. She thrashed against the guards, screaming, "This is a lie! You cannot do this to me!" But there was no escape. The world finally saw her for what she truly was, a monster. Amani, who had once laughed at Nyah's suffering, now wept as their luxurious world crumbled. "This is all your fault, Nyah!" she shrieked, her voice filled with desperation. Nyah met her stepsister's gaze, but there was no anger left in her, just pity. "You were given everything and still chose cruelty," Nyah said softly. "Now you face the consequences." As Mama Jalia was led away, Nyah felt the weight of years of pain lift off her shoulders. Justice had been served. For the first time in her life, she was free. Chief Zuberi turned to Nyah, his eyes filled with emotion. Without hesitation, he pulled her into a tight embrace. "You are family," he whispered. "You will never suffer again." Tears welled in Nyah's eyes. For so long, she had dreamed of a moment like this. A home, a family, someone who truly cared. And now, it was real. She moved into the palace, no longer a servant, no longer a girl forced to eat scraps on a cold kitchen floor. She was given the education she had been denied, the love she had been starved of. But she never forgot those who had helped her when she had nothing. Auntie Casey, the woman who had saved her life, was honored for her kindness. General Mosi, who had risked everything to tell her the truth, was given back the honor that had been stripped from him. Nyah, once a forgotten child, now had power, and she knew exactly how to use it. She dedicated her life to helping orphan children, those who had suffered like she had, those who had been discarded by the world. She became their voice, their protector. And one day, as she stood before a massive crowd, her heart swelled with pride. "I was once a girl with no home, no name, and no hope," she said, her voice steady, powerful. "But fate had bigger plans for me." She smiled, looking over the faces of the children she had saved, the people who now believed in her. If only my stepmother had known. She was mistreating the president's daughter. The crowd erupted into applause, but Nyah only looked up at the sky, whispering a silent thank you to her parents. She had found her destiny, and she would never be silenced again. If you loved Nyah's journey from suffering to strength, don't stop here. Watch the next video to see more powerful stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Click on the end screen videos and keep the inspiration going. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories. Your support helps us bring more amazing content to you.